Good evening. We are very privileged to have with us Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister who's extremely articulate, very well informed, and always takes a question on his chin. So let's begin. We've been looking forward to this session all day, and finally we have been presented with the opportunity. Now, Mr. Goyal, the topic today is about the continuity of reforms. And many people say that continuity takes some sort of a beating when political parties take a bit of a beating at the hustings. But I presume that will not be the case with the NDA. Now, I want to begin by quoting someone from his research paper in 2006, titled The Intriguing Relationship Between Growth and Institutions in India. This man was, until recently, a part of your government. He was the chief economic advisor. His name is Mr. Arvind Subramaniam. In the news, he said, India's founding fathers bequeathed a strong set of institutions, much stronger than for the average country. These institutions have played a key role in the turnaround in India's recent economic performance. Over time, though, it is not obvious that India's public institutions are keeping up with the demands of a rapidly evolving economy. Thus, contrary to the near universal views that the binding constraints to sustain Chinese-style rates of growth are the need to finish the unfinished task of rolling back the frontiers of the state, giving full play to the energies of the private sector, his paper believes that a future for reform agenda should focus equally on strengthening or reversing the decline in public institutions. I'm sure you agree with that statement in totality.
Well, at the outset, thank you, Rahul, and I'm glad that the Times Network has chosen to bring the economy back into focus after all the mudslinging that we saw over the last few days, very often getting politics to overtake good economics. Dr. Arvind Subramaniam is a very learned man and has a very good sense of understanding about long-term economic policy. He gave us very good advice over the last 3.5 years that he was with us. There can be no doubt at all that a nation is defined by the institutions that they create. And I must say the founding fathers of India, and in some sense, some of these institutions even precede our independence, have focused a lot on integrity of institutions, have focused a lot on integrity of individuals who head the institutions. They focus a lot about responsibility and accountability. One can't hope to have power without being responsible to use that power properly and being accountable to the people of India. And therefore, I think while institutions will and always remain important for strengthening India's economic progress and a better future for the people of India, one must certainly also keep in mind that all of us are individuals. All of us in our respective positions have goals, we have certain agendas, but at the end of the day, it's the public interest, it's national interest which will be paramount. And since you started your comments by talking about your desire that this current setback, and I believe you alluded to that, yes, this current little setback on the 3 states, hopefully will not derail our huge thrust on reform, our huge thrust to transform the mindset of the nation. I'd like to share with your esteemed audience a particular dialogue that Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, in a recent cabinet meeting, had given to us. We were taking a very major policy decision, which was not a very convenient decision politically. It was certainly not a decision a government getting into election mode would have ever taken.
Is this about Air India?
Well, we've taken a lot of very bold decisions. We are certainly not a government that fights shy of taking inconvenient decisions, but in national interest and public interest. And I remember several members of the cabinet in the meeting were trying to suggest that we can jolly well do this a little later. There's no need to do it right now and then. And maybe it should be deferred. The Prime Minister had only two questions of all of us in his cabinet. A, is the decision good for the people of India? Is the decision in national interest? And if it ticks on both these counts, then now is the time to do it, irrespective of political considerations, irrespective of the timing being linked to an election. And our job as his colleagues in the government is to take that message to the people of India and explain that to the people of India. And I think I can list out countless examples, including demonetization, which at that point of time in November, most people felt that there's an election in March and we would be wiped out in that election, given the inconvenience some people had to face and which was blown somewhat out of proportion also at that point of time. But he had the courage of conviction that he is doing it for the good of India. He's preparing an honest nation. He's preparing a nation to accept that the long-term honesty is going to have a premium. We will have a nation free of corruption. We will have a nation which pays its taxes honestly. And the people of India give him complete support because they trust that he's that one leader who can change the destiny of India.
Well, given the centrality of maintaining the autonomy of institutions to reform and therefore to growth, I want to ask you, because there has been a lot of criticism about your relationships with various autonomous institutions. You should have been strengthening them, is the criticism, but you're weakening them.
You know, by the way, there's a lot of criticism that I read in the Times of India about me and the work that I do. But I think you strengthen me by your criticism. And I'd like to share an example with your group here. I was the Union Power Minister and I was handling the program which Honorable Prime Minister had announced from the Red Fort, that within 1,000 days we'll make sure that electricity reaches every village in the country. And those villages which were left were the remotest and the most difficult to reach out to. And of course, that was to a design that if we reach it to every village and then to every hamlet around the villages, that's the only way we can reach it to every individual and every home in the country. After all, we can't have a nation that 70 years after independence still has millions of people starved of electricity or deprived of a basic amenity. And while I was doing the electrification of villages, there was a front page headlined article in the Times of India, criticism, just to reconfirm, which said that there were 3 villages in Rajasthan, which on my mobile app, and you know all my work is given out on mobile apps at the highest degree of transparency. That's been the credo of this government. On my mobile app, it was showing that we've electrified these 3 villages. Now, obviously, the central government takes data from the state, puts it onto the app, and that's how it was showing. When I first read it, my initial reaction was, what the hell, my officers have made a mistake. These villages could not have got electricity because your article had said that these villages don't exist at all. Now, as a person born and brought up in Mumbai, lived all my life in Mumbai, I could never for the life of me imagine a situation where there are revenue villages which don't exist at all. So I immediately dispatched officers to visit these 3 villages. I actually found that because the water table in these villages had gone too low, the people had migrated and there was nobody living in those villages. And therefore, those villages were actually non-existent, thanks to your article. And actually, it was an eye-opener for me. I have publicly felicitated the Times of India and acknowledged the contribution of Times for highlighting a subject that I was not aware of.
You're not addressing my question.
I'm addressing your point only. And looking at that criticism, I was able to find 950 such villages across the country, which on revenue record are shown as villages, were shown as unelectrified villages. If your article hadn't come, I would actually have been funding the electrification of those villages. And you know, in the good old days, this was a regular practice where that money went, God knows.
Implicit in
we
your
were able
response,
to save that money of the people of India.
Okay.
And therefore, criticism and some sort of disagreement is always good.
Very good.
It strengthens relationships and institutions.
But implicit in this example that you have picked is also a tacit admission that there was actually a problem. There was a problem.
Exactly. And if at all anybody in this room, and even if you think that we are perfect, then I think we are living in a fool's paradise.
Okay, so we're going to examine the nature of the problem. And let me quote some of your political opponents. The former Finance Minister Chidambaram. He says, the Planning Commission has been shut down. UPSC, UGC, CIC, CEC, and now CVC are in a state of breakdown. The reputation of investigating agencies like the CBI and ED has been irretrievably tarnished. The Income Tax Department has unleashed tax terrorism. And the latest victim is the RBI. Mr. Yechuri, the boss of the left, he comes out and says the BJP is seeking to impose institutional emergency without an official declaration. How do you respond to this?
I can respond to each one of them. I don't know what is the time limit, but I can respond to each one of them and show you how hollow the criticism is that is.
So let's talk about the RBI.
Let's first talk about, what was the first name you said?
Well,
first institution?
The Planning Commission. The Planning Commission.
Planning Commission. Now, the Planning Commission of India was the one which took out the numbers, which showed that India will need X amount of power in a few years from the time that they came out with that report. And basis that, thousands and thousands of megawatts of power plants were set up across the country. It was the same Planning Commission. I'm using an example from a ministry that I've run. It was the same Planning Commission which said that India can never increase its coal production. Therefore, all these plants should be built based on imported coal, which will continue to be imported not for 1 year, 2 years, but for 25 years at least after that. And therefore, a big drain on the exchequer, while we have the third or fourth largest coal reserve in the country. To date, we are required to import coal for thermal plants because the plants are designed on imported coal. It was the same Planning Commission which said that, but we'll have to invest in imported coal. We'll have to set up plants with imported coal. So now we have huge NPAs in the power sector, thanks to large investments made based on that Planning Commission's report.
So it's outlived its purpose, utility.
It was what was being done in Russia, and because of which Russia had to dismantle that controlled and planned economy. And certainly a Planning Commission, with due respect to my friend Manish here, a Planning Commission which was also controlled by a NAC, a National Advisory Council.
Right.
That was a lethal combination which took the country down the tube in 5 10 years.
So the basic point that Mr. Chidambaram and Yechuri are making was in the context of the RBI so-called crisis.
I'm happy to go through that whole list. I have demolished one. I'll tell you each one of those.
He came through to get to that point.
They're talking of income tax.
So let's...
Ladies and gentlemen, they're talking of income tax terrorism. Did all of you not get your income tax refund into your bank account or into your home within the first 3 months of this year?
Okay.
Is that tax terrorism? Or was it better? Or was it better that you go to your income tax office? You know what else is the connotation of going to an income tax office? And then pay a percentage of your income tax return as you had to do until 2014.
Okay, so
let's take the others also. I'll come to the last.
You don't want
worry,
to,
my friend.
You don't want to get to the CBI. You don't want to get to the RBI.
Once and for all, let's sort out once and for all. This cannot sort to be spread.
So let's get to
now,
the RBI.
It may make very exciting articles for the newspaper, or maybe give you some TRPs on your channel. But the reality is that what we are trying to do is fight the system, fight entrenched vested interests, and obviously that is going to hurt some people.
Okay, but that's not
true.
true.
That is the campaign that is going on.
Okay, so I'm going to persist, and I'm going to try and get. I told you, he does take questions on his chin effectively. RBI boss Urujit Patel.
The 8 other institutions that you talked about.
We will. RBI boss Urujit Patel quit on the 10th, and his predecessor, Mr. Raghuram Rajan, he said this. He said, given that Dr. Patel
getting into my
is
favorite subject, but I have to control myself on this subject.
Okay.
And you've already asked Mr. Arun Jaitley, I'm sure, this question.
And
you must have got a politically correct answer.
You got. But we don't want political correctness from Piyush Goyal. We want the hard facts. Okay, so let me ask you. Given that Dr. Patel is a very honorable civil servant...
Don't need to repeat all that. Many of us read that statement.
Okay, so you know the statement.
The gentleman is looking for a political career, which he should announce quickly.
Political career?
The gentleman you are trying to quote. But I have only one simple point to mention. The day the gentleman you're quoting demitted office, the stock market shot up and zoomed like anything.
Okay.
And in the last 3 days, we have seen the stock market go up by what, 1,100 points in 3 days? Despite our losing all the 3 elections. Despite that. So I don't think you need to
I hope the stock market didn't surge because you lost the elections and maybe people thought that things would be addressed better. But
even if that is the cause.
So if Raghuram Rajan...
Wait a minute, let me complete, my friend. Even if that is the cause, that shows that we are people who are willing to take criticism on the chin, as you said it.
Absolutely.
And we learn from every victory, we learn from every defeat. And we are willing to move forward in the spirit of positivity.
Okay. I will draw your attention to a man who is still employed in government.
I think a lot is being said and spoken about so-called RBI autonomy.
Let me just, give me 30 seconds on this. This is important.
But to my mind, if at all somebody should be complaining, it is us, because we gave complete autonomy to the institutions. But I think it's our duty also to hold institutions accountable to the people of India.
Okay.
I would love to know from all the people assembled here,
I don't think anyone's questioning that.
Whether they are able to get loans from the bank easily, whether a person who's got a housing loan, whether he's able to get his installments in time.
I don't think anyone's questioning that.
What is the liquidity situation in the country today?
They're questioning the manner in which
I'm sure everybody would be having certain thoughts on that.
You are seeking accountability. Let me just draw your attention to someone who's, at least as of now, not seeking a political appointment, and that is the Deputy RBI Chief, Viral Acharya. You know what he has said. And let me
Rahul,
for purposes of this audience, let me read out.
For my sake, and to protect my job, I think I should keep my mouth zipped on this subject.
Okay, but just, I understand that you are seeking a little bit of discretion, but let me press on, because this is important. We're talking about the continuity of reforms, and you would agree that the banking sector is central to any scripting of a reform story as we go on. Now, I just want to read out this. Implicit in what he was saying is that governments that do not respect central bank independence will sooner or later incur the wrath of financial markets, ignite economic fire.
Before?
Okay, so let me ask you. Is this entire, I don't know how you want to describe it, disagreement with the RBI, disagreement, intellectual, what have you, because in an election year, you're fearing reverses and you want the RBI to do you certain
Not
favors?
at all. I think what the gentleman you referred to was reminding the people of India was about the interference with the autonomy of the RBI many years ago by a very senior, illustrious Prime Minister, some 30, 40 years ago, who had actually sacked an RBI governor and then was thrown out by the people of India. Maybe he was referring to that instance, I don't know. But we did not have anybody leave the RBI. We did not ask anybody to leave the RBI. I think we are accountable to the people of India who have elected us into office. I believe it is important for us in government to ensure an orderly functioning of the banking system. I think it is our government which had the gumption to bite the bullet, to say that if an account is an NPA, whether it was lent in 2006 or 2008 or 2010 or 2012, whether it's been rolled over 3 times, whether it's been evergreen 5 times, irrespective of that. Let the asset quality be recognized for what it is. We recognize them for what they are. For the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in the history of India, big borrowers are required to repay the banks. Had you ever heard any big borrower ever being forced to repay money to the banks? Had you ever heard, I'm sure some of you may have heard, there was a time when a person like you or me went to the bank and took a loan of 1 crore, 5 crore, 10 crore, or even 100 crores. We used to have sleepless nights if we had a problem in repaying the bank. We were worried the bank will be at our door, the bank will be asking us to repay it. But the moment you gave loans to 10,000 crore, 20,000 crore to somebody, the guy had private yachts and private aircrafts. And he never bothered about repaying the banks because they said, now it's the problem of the banks to recover the loan from me. And we've changed the ground rules. People are losing steel plants. People are losing refineries. People are losing huge amounts of real estate. People are losing their power plants. People are being made to pay back the money that they took from the banks.
There is evidence to suggest that. But there was also demo that you can have this actually. Yeah, there was also demo that came in, and Arvind Subramanian, who you said that you listened to deeply, respected deeply, said that it was a draconian measure. Now, many people feel that
I think you missed out his whole sentence.
Yeah.
And he missed out his own comments.
I know, but it didn't have much of an impact on the economy, and he's surprised that it did.
He said draconian means a very strong measure. It's called a draconian measure.
Okay. Well,
now, when you, Times Now, interview somebody on your 9 o'clock
the last time I wrote that headline...
It's a draconian experience, I can tell you that.
Am I replicating it here to some extent? Okay, let me ask you.
I think you've changed the ground rules a little bit in the last 2-3 years.
Okay, so let me ask you, that's a clever one. Let me ask you, prompt corrective action is what...
I'm glad you asked.
Is what the RBI undertook. Then they went on to, or they were nudged into fixing appropriate economic capital framework, which means basically loosen your purse strings and give us some money so that we can spend on some of our schemes, which will bail out the same people that demo did in. That's
the allegation of some uninformed people who ran this country for so many years, and because of whom we are in this current state of affairs. After all, none of these NPAs are money lent after 2014.
Yeah.
We are suffering the ills of the past which we inherited. Virasat mein mili hui ye bimari hai.
Deputy Governor Acharya has also made the same point. Now, he's not exactly ill-informed.
Let me explain both these things. I think it's a good opportunity since it's an economic conclave. Let's address the prompt corrective action framework. First of all, the prompt corrective action worldwide focuses on capital adequacy of the banks. It does not talk about several other factors that we have in India. Let's all of us be clear about that. Second point, we had a prompt corrective action framework introduced by, I think it was Mr. Vajpayee's government, about 15, 17 years ago, who introduced PCA in the first place in the country. And it had 3 or 4, actually 3 important elements to it. It said that if a bank breaches the capital adequacy of a certain percentage or falls below that, if a bank has net non-performing assets of above 10%, and if a bank does not give a return on its assets of 0.25% of the net assets of the bank or the gross assets of the bank, then it comes under a prompt corrective action framework in which certain lending restrictions are put in. Well, that's fine. And basis that, some of the banks may have had to go into prompt corrective action, particularly because of the lending indiscriminately and unfairly done between 2006 and 2014, about which I think everybody in this room knows. We've talked about it on several occasions. And lo and behold, what do you do one day? Without any reference to the board of directors, you suddenly, out of the blues, without any of us knowing it, and I think this has not been debated enough, not even on your channel, which prides itself on a lot of investigative journalism. Even you have not come out with the fact that 1st April 2017, as recently as that, suddenly RBI decides to change the PCA framework and say, no, no, no. Now we are going to insist on 9% capital adequacy ratio against 5.5% or 6% or whatever it was before. So they have drastically changed it to 9%. And ladies and gentlemen, bear you, not even in the Western world, not even in the US or Europe, where Basel comes from, Basel also doesn't provide for 9%. Basel also talks of 8%. But RBI says, no, anybody with not anything less than 9% capital. Then they say that now net NPA need not be 10%. If you breach 6% also, it's going to be considered in the PCA. And the worst is the third condition. The third condition says that now we won't look at 0.25% return on assets. You have to have profit for 2 years continuously. And then on this liquidity ratio, they had another condition. Now on 1st April 17, you suddenly drastically change the norms. So it's like changing the ground rules of a cricket match halfway when the match is gone. So one team has played its innings, and then the bosses decide now we're changing the rules of the game. The boundary is being shifted 20 meters or 15 meters before where it was, and now we'll play the game. Or in our case, the boundary will now be 15 meters even beyond, and now you give back and play the game. And 2 years profit continuously for a bank where you have already put in so many caveats. You have decided that they will not be allowed to lend. You have decided that if they have to lend to any of these people here who run a small-scale industry or trying to build up a small industry, will not be allowed unless you have two rating agencies give you a A+ or A rating. I mean, unreasonable conditionality.
So you're suggesting that the RBI has been unreasonable?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I said the ground rules of the game
were changed.
If you change in between and throttle the banking system, who is the sufferer?
Well, that's big breaking news.
India,
I don't think we've got a response like this till now from government on what we have actually witnessed over the last few days. So this is big news. But let me once again draw your attention back.
Wait a minute. So my question to all of you is, would you not want the government to at least ask a question? What prompts you to change the rules halfway in the game? Did you discuss it with anybody? Was there any experts consulted? Is it comparable to international norms? When you quote international examples and you give an example of a country like Argentina to compare India, and India, ladies and gentlemen, is a country which has never in its history defaulted on any international obligation, never, irrespective of which government comes into power. Now, this kind of allusion, this kind of comparison is certainly not acceptable to anybody. We are responsible to the small industrialist. We are responsible to the first-time house owner. We are responsible to the people, the self-employed, who are trying to make a life, making a beginning, starting a new enterprise, working to become a unicorn.
Okay.
And I think it's important for us to ensure that we support them, and ground rules changed halfway in between.
Coming from one of the four economic ministers in government, but a preeminent voice who has also controlled the finance portfolio. But yes, I want to draw your attention to this important.
Wait a minute. There you also raised about the economic capital framework.
Yes.
It's a complete canard that is being sought to be spread by certain people and which is carried by newspapers and channels such as yours.
A canard.
Complete canard. This government never, and categorically the Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, categorically, and so as the Honorable Finance Minister said, we are meeting our fiscal deficit targets, unlike the government before us,
that was
without
said
a
to our
single
channel by
rupee
the Finance
coming
Minister
from the capital of
in an
the
interview to
Reserve Bank.
Navika Kumar. And
My
she
friend,
said that
without taking a single rupee from the capital of reserves of RBI, we have the courage of conviction and confidence that
so
we
then
are
why
meeting.
is why
Hang on,
is
let me finish. We are meeting the fiscal deficit targets. So all of you in the stock market or all of you economists can note that. But I must share with you, what is this capital that's lying with RBI? Just so that everybody understands what we are talking of, right? And never there was an intention that this money should be transferred to the government of India or any of that. Now, there have been two committees in the past which have studied the capital framework that RBI should have.
True.
There was a Subramania committee which recommended the RBI should have about 12% of its assets as reserves. It was not accepted by RBI, fine. Then there was a Usha Thorat committee, I think in 2002 or 3,
yeah,
or 4, sometime around that time, which was set up by RBI again, which said that, okay, we have revisited the whole thing, and they said the RBI should have 17.76% as reserves of their total assets. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be amazed to know, as I speak with you now, let me give you both figures. As of 30th June, the Reserve Bank had nearly 29% of their assets as capital reserves. Today, it's over 30%. It was 28%.
It was 28.
It was 27.86.
Yeah,
Let's get an
right,
exact
28.
figure.
Yeah.
It was 27.86% in June. And today it is over 30%. Now you tell me, your money, that's your money, not being put to good use, lying there, it could have been used possibly to support the banks, just like the US Fed did in 2008. At that time, all these economists were in the US. All of them were all praised for how the Americans handled the Lehman crisis.
Some people would say government should come out. Some people
Are
would
we
say,
not supposed to handle any crisis? Or are we supposed to support crisis?
well, some people would say you had a mandate and you could have actually gone and addressed the deeper issue by actually privatizing some of these banks, because look at how the private sector banks have done. They've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, hang on. Ladies and gentlemen, you please tell me, has the private sector covered themselves with glory? I can show you hundreds of instances, whether in coal, who did Colgate? It was the government, then government of the day, and the private sector. So is that very honorable? Is that very glorious?
I said some people have said.
Right,
Including,
so in the banking, have you had
including Mr.
less
Arvind
scandals in the
Panagria, the
private
former head
sector,
of
ladies
Niti
and
Aayog.
gentlemen? Have you heard of less scandals in the private sector? So this is a complete canard. We are not going to privatize a single one of these public sector banks.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why we are not going to do it. We are not going to do it because of all of you. When I started my business, it was no private bank that gave me money. When I was a young lad of 16 or 17, it was a public sector bank that gave me my first dollar, first rupee, and helped me come up in life, and I can sit here before you today. It is a private public sector bank which reaches the villages of India, which reaches the poor of India. When we want to open Jan Dhan accounts, it's these same public sector banks who go out there, who toil day and night. Not to say that they are perfect. They have done their mistakes, there have been problems, and we are acting on that. Tell me any government in the past which acted on bank officials, which took them to task, which investigated scandals. After all, why did all these people have to run away from India? Why they took all these loans before 2014? They started all these scandals before 2014. But they never had to run away because they were never scared of the government. It's only that now they are scared of Mr. Modi and they have to run away from India.
Well, one former employee of the government who you have said is looking for a political career said that he did inform. He did inform the Modi Sarkar about a problem. We will move beyond because actually...
No. I can answer, yaar. कोई incomplete बात मत छोड़ो. भाई अगर इनकम टैक्स की एक रिपोर्ट आई और वो इनकम टैक्स के एक ऑफिशियल के पास गई जिसपे it went to an official of the income tax, and if there was any laxity, he will also be questioned and he will also be brought to task.
I was expecting to have a candid conversation, but not one where pretty much every answer has elicited breaking news. Time's up, it's flashing before me, but I have to take the liberty of asking you one more question. And that's to look a little ahead.
I can answer you till the cows come home, no problem.
Yes, we're just looking ahead. The cows will come home. But I just want, and it depends on who's going to milk them. But most importantly, let me ask you.
देखिए, cow का agenda कोई ढोंगी लोग थोड़े टाइम के लिए फोटो ऑप्स के लिए कर सकते हैं, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि इस देश का विश्वास प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के साथ है।
Okay. We've had some reversals. As a political party, the government...
Reversals are a part of life.
But the one...
Look at the Times Now ratings. If any of you follows the Times Now rating, you must have heard that sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down.
They haven't gone down.
Rahul Shivshankar doesn't give up, does he? They haven't gone down? You want me to send you the ratings? I monitor it every day, boss.
They haven't gone down.
Hang
on. This is a cannot.
Campaign for my
this
party.
Is a cannot. This is a cannot. They haven't come down.
Achha, okay.
We're at 34%. We've always been there.
If at all,
and I'll just show you my WhatsApp
validation,
message.
I'll tweet it if you want me to validate.
You do that.
Good,
you do
but
that.
I can tell you with your today's session,
now, I just got a message. I just got a message that now your group in print is not the largest circulating group. Now, does that mean you're going to wind up your group?
Okay, so let me ask you. The election results have suggested that there is some agrarian distress. 2 more minutes. I think we have to give him the opportunity to answer this question. Sorry. Are we going to see the government address this, and in what way?
Well, let me tell you, this government, and I think it's a very good question you have raised. It's a nice way to conclude this very important session for me, because it's probably the first time I used to normally control myself on these subjects. This government is not in the job for the short run, and neither are we going to do policies which are short-sighted. We believe that this country, just like many other countries in the world, can progress very rapidly, can ensure that every citizen in this country has a good quality of life. And we believe for that we will have to prepare a strong fundamental foundation, basis which this country can have decades and decades of prosperity, without which we will not be able to ensure that the last man at the bottom of the pyramid has a good quality of life. After all, has there been any government in the past which gave the farmers 100% of their loss in the event of a distress? Has there been any government in the past which bothered about the dignity of our women and said it is not acceptable to us that 2 out of every 3 women in our country cannot use the toilet between sunrise and sunset? Okay, it's just not acceptable that only 34% of Indian homes have a toilet. We took it up to 95% homes today who have a toilet of their own. As a power minister, it's unacceptable that you and I have 24 hours power, and there are 300 million people living deprived of electricity. And out of that, not less than 120, 130 million are young children. They are the future of India. Just like my father studied under a lamppost, or Prime Minister Modi himself studied in kerosene lamps. We didn't want any child in India to ever be deprived of electricity. Saubhagya will make sure we have increased electricity access to 95% homes today. Another 3 months, it will be 100% of willing consumers will have electricity. We have brought financial inclusion to 100% of the people of India. We cannot accept 400 cigarettes going into the body of a mother or a sister, just like you saw in that Chalo Jeete Hain, Prime Minister Modi's mother cooking for the family and taking in smoke. We have increased LPG connections, the spread of that, from 50% in 2014 to 95% today. We've added more connections in 5 years than in the last 60 years. So ladies and gentlemen, this government believes that जब दीवार में दीमक लग जाती है, and the same goes for corruption. Corruption को मिटाना है तो जड़ से मिटाना पड़ेगा, from the root. और जब दीवार में दीमक लगती है तो हम में से कोई भी उस पे ऊपर का एक पोता पेंट का नहीं लगाते. In Bombay language, it's called चूना लगाना. Am I right? In Mumbai हम बोलते हैं ना चूना लगाया, कि भाई दीवार पे दीमक लग गई है, एक पेंट ऊपर लगा दो तो बहुत सुंदर दिखेगी, कुछ समय के लिए तो सुंदर दिखेगी, पर दीमक अंदर पड़ा रहेगा. इस सरकार ने दीमक निकालने का काम किया और जड़ से इन समस्याओं को हल किया. और हमें पूरा विश्वास है कि भारत की जनता ये समझती है ये रिजल्ट्स वैसे कोई बहुत बुरे नहीं है। ये रिजल्ट्स की परसेंटेजेस देखो तो आज भी मध्य प्रदेश में हमें ज्यादा वोट मिले हैं कांग्रेस से, 15 साल सरकार चलाने के बाद, एंटी इनकम्बेंसी के बाद। तो मेरा विश्वास है देश की जनता एक लंबे समय के लिए प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी को चाहती है और उनको विश्वास है कि यही एक नेता है जो देश का भविष्य उज्जवल बनाएगा और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर देश का नाम ऊंचा करेगा।
In 4 months, the people will decide. Thank you very much, Mr. Piyush Goyal. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.